One Piece chapter 1046. Today we talk about the true nature of Luffy's Hito Hito no Mi model Nika, now revealed during his Gear 5. We also explain the mystery of Wano and the connection to Joy Boy and the One Piece. Also, only a small percentage of the people who watch our videos are actually subscribed, so if you end up liking this video, consider subscribing. Please enjoy this video. Let's go! One Piece chapter 1046 begins with a continuation of Luffy versus Kaido. And just as we predicted in our last chapter reviews, Kaido, although he didn't mention it directly, has already started thinking about the possibility that Luffy might actually be Joy Boy. He asks Luffy who the hell he is. Of course, this question doesn't directly confirm our prediction that Kaido actually understood or at least considered the possibility that Luffy could be Joy Boy. But why else would Kaido ask Luffy this question if it wasn't about Joy Boy? The scene immediately switches to Zunesha talking about Joy Boy's return, further emphasizing that Kaido is indirectly alluding to Joy Boy when talking to Luffy. Luffy then tells Kaido what we all know, that he is Monkey D. Luffy, the man who will surpass Kaido and become King of the Pirates. But Kaido knows that only Joy Boy can become the king of the pirates, and he believes that he is the closest to the king. If Luffy succeeds in defeating Kaido, who believes or at least wants to believe that he is Joy Boy, he will undoubtedly understand that Luffy is indeed the true Joy Boy. I can imagine Kaido being defeated on the ground out of energy, admitting defeat, and then confirming that Luffy is indeed the one. Kaido then reveals that what is happening to Luffy is an awakening, where the mind and body will be able to use the full potential of their abilities, so that the body and mind will basically adapt to the true essence of the fruit. And here I think the main focus should definitely be on Luffy's mind, which has changed drastically. In general though, Luffy hasn't really changed. He's always been the fun guy who enjoyed life to the fullest. This is of course largely due to the fact that he ate the nika fruit. Now that the fruit has awakened, this personality trait is just multiplied many times since the day he ate the fruit. In fact, Luffy was a little bit grumpy before he ate the so-called gomu gomu no mi. I just wonder why exactly this personality trait is necessary for the nika fruit awakening to fully use the true potential of the devil fruit power. Is it because the true potential is limited only by Luffy's imagination, as the Gorosei have already described? Which is why Luffy must have a silly and ridiculous imagination to be completely free of any objective limitation that might prevent him from using that power in ways that people would never do without such ridiculous thoughts. We have seen some very ridiculous moves that Luffy made during the fight against Kaido after his devil fruit awakening. But at the same time, none of those moves were unnecessary, but helped him defend against Kaido's attacks and even attack in a way that Kaido could not have expected. And thus, no matter how ridiculous they are all important for Luffy to finally win the battle against Kaido. A fight is more than just strength, it's about technique and most importantly being unpredictable, which Luffy has definitely become. Even for someone who can see into the future, it wouldn't be easy to deal with such a surreal fighting style as Luffy shows with his new Gear 5 transformation. And maybe that's exactly the key to this devil fruit power, because there are abilities that can predict moves and very powerful devil fruit abilities that don't require strategy or technique to make the user very powerful. There are powers that are just very hard to compete with. That is why such unpredictability is so important in a fight against such powerful opponents. Any technique could be easily adapted to the current opponent, which is why he uses so many new and random techniques for which he does not even have a name. The core essence of the devil fruit, imagination. But not as many have imagined so that Luffy can do everything he wants, but that he is ridiculously unpredictable because of his fantasy. I think that's the best approach to the imagination aspect that is part of Luffy's devil fruit. That's why the Gorosei call it the most ridiculous power in the world. Simply because it is ridiculous, but in a positive way, because sometimes ridiculous solutions are the best. Especially with a rubber body that makes almost anything possible, even against the strongest opponents. And so Kaido, right after saying that Luffy's mind has adapted to his devil fruit ability, also confirms that it is a ridiculous power. That's the whole point. Being ridiculous is being unpredictable. Kaido continues the conversation by saying that he has lost a lot in this war. His manpower, his castle, and everything he has built in Wano. He assumes the same is true for Luffy, which he addresses to Luffy in the form of a question. Which is kind of weird because I can't really remember what Luffy could have lost in this war that would compare to Kaido's description. The keywords are a lot, manpower, castle, everything he built in Wano. Of course, Luffy has lost manpower because of his new alliance. That's a tragedy, but it's something that happens in every big war. It's nothing new for Luffy. Other than that, he hasn't really lost anything else that could fit to a lot. Certainly not a castle, and there's nothing Luffy built in Wano. Unless Kaido isn't talking to Luffy directly but to Joy Boy. And we know that Joy Boy is a person from the Void Century 800 years ago, who built the poneglyphs together with the people of Wano. So he's very much connected to this country. Perhaps he was even a big part of the country itself. In any case, he is part of this secret and the reason why the Kozuki clan protects it. This opens up the possibility that Joy Boy could be much more important to Wano than what has been revealed so far. There definitely has to be a reason why the people of Wano trusted him so much. So this definitely speaks to that possibility. And now if we remember Big Mom's words, she said, "Does the One Piece really exist? What is it? Where is it? Some of it is in this country, isn't it?" That will then explain why Wano is so important to Kaido, because it is part of the One Piece. And Kaido, the person who wants to become Joy Boy, has done everything he can to make Wano his. Almost as if he knows that Wano was a big part of Joy Boy, that he lost because it's no longer in the hands of the Kozuki clan, because Kaido took it away from them. So basically Kaido took Wano from Joy Boy to become Joy Boy. And now Luffy, who has become Joy Boy, is taking it back from Kaido because he's actually the real Joy Boy. And Wano belongs to him. So everything that Joy Boy could have built together with the people of Wano 800 years ago has been taken away, and so the details Kaido mentioned when he asked could actually fit. A very intriguing thought that gains even more validity when you consider Luffy's answer. He indirectly agrees with Kaido but says he's not done yet and will get back everything Kaido stole no matter what. And if our theory is correct, Kaido didn't steal from anyone other than Joy Boy, or rather the people Joy Boy entrusted his inheritance to, that is, Wano's people. That's why Kaido phrased his question as if Wano somehow belongs to Luffy. Before my partner continues with One Piece chapter 1046 review, please take a moment to leave a like. Thank you.
The fight between Kaido and Luffy then continues with Kaido spamming his attacks at Luffy and each blow hitting Luffy directly. But for some reason, it doesn't seem to bother him at all, even though Kaido reinforces each attack with Haki, which should be effective against Luffy's rubber body. But since Luffy's Devil Fruit awakening, Luffy has been acting very strange, completely different from any other Devil Fruit user we have met so far, and also different from any Devil Fruit awakening we have seen so far. We know that Luffy literally seemed to feel no injuries nor receive any damage in his Gear 5. This fits with our discovery from the last One Piece chapter review, that Luffy doesn't really use a traditional energy source that a normal human would use for their techniques. We know that Luffy relies heavily on his normal body energy and thus a lot of food when he uses his Gear 4. Once he has used his transformation for a certain amount of time, he will lose his ability to transform unless he eats a lot of food and takes a little nap. Both essential things for a human body to regenerate and gain new strength. So Gear 4 consumes that energy, but Gear 5 however is quite different. We have already seen Luffy run out of the mysterious energy that keeps him in Gear 5, revealing his true physical strength. He's literally on the verge of death, but then suddenly something knocked him back into the form of the sun god Nika, and Luffy was suddenly fit again. We assume that it had something to do with his will, and thus the will to win against Kaido, free the slaves of Wano, and become the king of pirates. This will make his heart beat to the sound of the liberation drums, causing his transformation into Gear 5, in which Luffy, for some reason, uncontrollably releases Conqueror's Haki, even without doing it on purpose. As we know, Conqueror Haki depends on the will of the user, and since Gear 5 seems to draw its power source from Luffy's will, we can also assume that this Conqueror's Haki itself is somehow connected to this whole system, where Luffy receives power from a mysterious source due to his will to keep fighting without actually being able to keep fighting. Perhaps this power even comes from the Conqueror's Haki itself. So he literally goes beyond what is physically possible, which fits perfectly with the idea that his power is limited only by his imagination. The bottom line is that it looks like Luffy can continue fighting in this form regardless of the consequences of his injuries. But it's possible that once he transforms back into the base form, he'll get back all the damage he took during the fight. Although this ability is beneficial during combat, since it always allows him to surpass any of his opponents in terms of resistance, it is also very disadvantageous, since injuries are the thing that keeps people alive, or rather keep them from getting into real mortal danger. But now that Luffy simply maintains Gear 5 until he defeats his opponents, he can risk going not only beyond what is physically possible, but also beyond what is necessary for a body to even stay alive. Perhaps Luffy is actually already in a life-threatening condition. So after he wins against Kaido and transforms back into his base form, he might then realize what physical state he really is in. This situation would be even worse if all the energy he used up in his Gear 5 was not actually from pure will, but will be drained from his body afterwards, which could cause severe and possibly long-lasting damage to Luffy's life force. Luffy already had this problem with his Gear 2 before the time skip, but with a lot of training and the discovery that eating a lot of food would give Luffy the energy he needed to continue this technique, he was able to bypass this life-threatening side effect. If his Gear 5 works the same way, but with the difference that Luffy is not forced to leave the transformation just because he is out of energy, then this could actually cause the same problem that Luffy initially had, and therefore despite the physical injuries, Luffy could be on the verge of death because he simply lacks the energy needed to maintain the normal physical functions. For example, the energy his heart needs to function properly. And so the battle of Luffy versus Kaido continues, just like the battle of Onigashima, with fire spreading everywhere and burning everything in its path. The fire is getting closer and closer to the basement where all the explosives are stored, which can have serious consequences if both the fire and the explosive come into contact. Then we see how everyone tries to deal with the situation. What's very interesting here is that it looks like Zoro actually lost his arm to the Grim Reaper, but we'll do a separate video on that later this week, because that would definitely make this video here too long. So subscribe if you don't want to miss the next One Piece video. We'll probably also talk about all the things that the Straw Hats are up to in the final minutes of the Battle of Onigashima in this video, so it's definitely worth watching it. The rest of the chapter is basically just Jinbei and Raizo trying to stop the fire with water. Raizo summons the water that Zunisha once washed himself with, and Jinbei then controls the water to spread it all over Onigashima. All that remains is for Momonosuke to finally go beyond his own limits and to make the cloud strong enough to hold Onigashima, because even if the fire is stopped, the main problem remains, and only Momonosuke can thus save all the citizens. The last page then shows Luffy falling from the sky, catching a lightning strike and holding it in his hands as if he were Zeus, ready to use it against Kaido. It seems like literally anything is possible for Luffy. Who knows, maybe he was even the one who created the lightning in the first place, a typical ability that could be explained by his Zoan Devil Fruit. So that's it for today, folks. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, don't forget to smash the like button, and if you're new to our channel, make sure to subscribe with the notification bell turned on. See you guys in the next video. Yami out.